few months back, we did some experimenting with wet milling antique muzzle loading propellant. Wet milling as opposed to dry milling. Now, dry milling is what I've usually done for the last 5 years or so. But one of the reasons why we wanted to try the wet mill method is we're trying to find a way to shorten up the mill times. As it sits right now, I have to mill our propellant for, at the very least, 24 hours. And that's if you're using a really low density charcoal like balsa or cottonelle toilet paper, or even cotton balls or something like that. I've found that if you're using an actual wood, osage or cottonwood or willow, you really need to mill it for at least 36, but we found 48 hours is pretty much optimal. Anything beyond that, you don't really gain that much. In the last experiment we did, we were using ethanol as our solvent. We were using cottonwood charcoal, which is an excellent charcoal. It's right up there with cottonelle toilet paper or willow or osage. And we milled it for 24 hours wet. After that, we let it dry, which takes a while. We pressed it to a density of 175, sorted it into 3F, glazed it for about 5 hours, and we took it out to the pasture to give it a try. And the performance was not all that stellar. It was accurate and consistent enough, but the power level, the velocity, was less than Swiss. If I remember right, it was low 16s. So what I did is I took that batch and I kept half of it, and I took the other half and I put it back in the mill and ran it for 24 hours dry. So we had the 24-hour wet and then the 24-hour dry, all one batch, and then we had the 24-hour wet batch. And we got some significant increase in velocity by milling it dry for another 24 hours. So that to me sounded like it just wasn't incorporated well enough. So with this new batch, we used 99% isopropyl alcohol and Osage orange charcoal. And as far as the amount of isopropyl alcohol, it was one of these cupfuls. That much right there in the picture. That's how much we used. Now, I milled this stuff for 12 hours, like I would usually. And after 12 hours, I popped it open to check it. Now, I did set some out in the sun for a little bit, and I sparked it off, and it did not look impressive. See all the white speckles?
That was pretty slow too.
It's not incorporated enough.
It's not done.
Again, keep in mind that we would like to try and shorten up the mill time. It's not going to do me any good to mill it just as long wet as I do dry. I don't see any gain in that really. So after seeing that, we decided to just mill it for another 12 hours for a total of 24 and go from there. So this is a standard 200-gram test batch, and that's 200 grams of dry components. As far as how much liquid, I don't know. I didn't weigh it. Like I said, it's just in that cup right there. But I did splash some more alcohol in the container, swirl it around to try and get as much of the powder or components out of there. So if it looks extra runny right there or extra wet, it's because I put more alcohol in it, just trying to get it into the container. After that, I let it dry in front of the fan all damn day. And then after that, the next day, it looked pretty dry. And then I put it in the toaster oven. Yeah, I know that might sound scary, but I have not had a mishap yet. I still have all my fingers and toes, and my mustache is still on my face. So spare me the lecture. I also don't put it in there at 300 degrees. I put it at 180 degrees, and I leave it in there with the door even open, just to try and get some of that alcohol out of there. After that, I pressed it. Now, I added the same amount of distilled water that I usually do, and I think that was not a good move because when I started to press it and make pucks, it was squeezing a lot. Okay, maybe I shouldn't say a lot, but there's a lot more moisture coming out of the bottom of my pucking die than I usually see, and it smelled like alcohol. So I'm sure it wasn't nearly as dry as I like to have it, especially because I go to extra lengths to make sure all of my components are as dry as I can get them when I mill them dry. We toast all of our nitrate in a toaster oven. We store all of our components in a vacuum chamber with desiccant because I want it as dry as I can possibly get it. The amount of moisture coming out of the puck, out of the pucking die, which I don't know if I have a picture of. I might have neglected that. Sorry. I guess you have to take my word for it. Is important because I calculate the density of all of my powder and I press it to 1.75 grams per cubic centimeter. And you do that by weight, the diameter, the dimensions of the puck, and the weight. And an interesting thing that happened about the density on this particular powder is it came out a little lower than usual. Allow me to show you.
Okay, well, sometimes this happens. So here's our wet mill powder. You can see I have my volumetric measure set at 55 because apparently I fucked up on the calculation, or I did something wrong. I suspect it has to do with the moisture content. But again, that's 55. And then watch this. 49.4. So I'm like 5 grains shy on my volumetric measure. Let's just try it again. I usually do this more than a couple times just to make sure. Now, I have been off a couple 3 grains before, but I'm not usually off 5. That's different. Yeah. Well, that's embarrassing. So, for the Remington, we'll set it at 30 grains on the volumetric measure because, again, I must have miscalculated the density somehow, some way, because 30 grains on the volumetric measure is 26.5 there. So I can maybe bring it down just a little bit there. But anytime I am off, this is all I have to do. Now, I'm not usually off 5 grains at 50, but, you know, that happens. So, yeah, there we go. 25.8, and that's right about 30. So, again, I suspect it had to do with the alcohol that was still in that. But either way, not hard to overcome.
Now, this isn't the first time that I've had this happen. Sometimes I'll be off 2 or 3 grains, not generally 5 like this, but it is something that can happen. Usually, if I'm off 3 or 4 grains, I just need to glaze it more. Also, if you tap the side of your measure, a lot of times it'll just settle and it'll get you there. But this stuff is probably a little bit lower density than 175, and the reason why it's a little low on the volumetric measure is probably because it was a lot more wet when I pressed it than I usually have. My pucks weigh 37.1 grams. You could go 37.2 if you're using more water, which actually, you know what, now that I think about it, I've never really taken account for the water weight when I press it. How scientific of me. As for the rest of the test, everything else is the same. The rifle we're using is a Kibler Southern Mountain Rifle, 45 caliber, using 50 grains of 3F, a 440 diameter ball, and a 20 thousandths patch. The revolver is a Remington New Model Army, 44 caliber, using a 454 diameter swaged round ball and 25 grains of 3F without any patch or wad or lube over the chamber mouth. So, here's how it went. And this is our wet mill powder. And I'll be honest, I don't really have high hopes for it. Just,
I don't know. I'm kind of 50-50.
yeah?
Yeah, me personally.
Any particular reason why you're so optimistic?
I never said optimistic.
Okay. Well, you're a lot more optimistic than me, I guess.
Well, I'm not sure. You know, I mean, it looked good flashing on the ground.
Well,
So it has
it looked better after we ran it for another 12 hours.
Yeah, yeah.
It didn't look that great to me at all.
No,
in fact, I would say something was wrong with it.
If we were going to do a 12-hour, it would have been a waste of nitrate, and I would have just sucked the nitrate
Yeah, would
back
have ended
out.
up just taking the nitrate out of it and using it for black powder that didn't suck. I mean, antique muzzleloading propellant.
Yes.
I've had a lot of people give me a hard time over using this Remington.
Super gay Remington.
Yeah, they're calling me a turncoat, and they're calling me a traitor, they're calling me all kinds of mean, horrible, nasty, ugly things. I keep saying it's like I don't like it, I just find that it makes a good test subject. That's all.
Then why don't you use your 44 Colt? That one works fine. So you are
Whose
gay.
size are you on anyway? This is our wet mill powder. 25 grains with a 4.54 round ball. $7.47.
Dang.
$7.80. $7.74. $7.61. $7.55. It's getting worse. $7.82.
Yeah,
It seems to be clean enough, but
yeah, does the action feel good?
that averaged $7.67.
That's junk.
That's what, 150 feet slower than
Yeah, just about.
Any Osage Orange or whatever. It should be 930
And change.
at the very least, 900. Ah, damn it.
Yeah, that sucks.
I hate it when I'm right. I mean, it seems to be clean enough, but
Yeah,
that's lame.
yeah. It's not like it wouldn't work, but you have to also consider, you know, now you're going through a solvent. You still got to mill it for 24 hours minimum. You're not going to get a proper, you know, high 800s.
It should average, if this was just dry mill Osage, it should average at the very least on a cold day, 900.
Yeah.
Unacceptable. Well, I'm already not excited about this stuff, Derek.
Well, I understand because it wasn't very exciting in the pistols, so.
No, it wasn't. Unfortunate, I guess.
Yeah.
Now, if I
was hoping that it would at least be as good as, you know, like, I don't know, not Osage, but, you know, maybe cotton or something.
This is Osage. It's just
Well, what I mean is
it's
like
wet milled Osage.
Yeah, I was hoping that wet mill Osage would be as good as dry mill Osage, but I was wrong. So
Well,
wrong.
let's see. Maybe it'll really surprise us. So, here's shot number one with our wet milled powder. I'm going to shoot at the bottom left square up there. Okay, 17, 19.
Okay.
That's not as bad as I was expecting. I was going to say that
I was figuring it was going to be...
I was thinking mid-16s.
I was going to say GoX, yeah.
Oh, I didn't have my earplugs in.
Oh.
Put my earplugs in before I get yelled at by somebody. Okay, shot number 2 with the wet mill powder. $17.01. Okay.
Well, it's looking a little better than GoX.
Well, let's see. The last time we did GoX, I think we got, what, right about 1,700? 1,690 something?
Was it?
I think so, yeah.
God, I can't remember that far. Because I know that...
That was when we remilled them. We remilled GoX and Swiss to see if we couldn't make them faster.
Yeah, and we made the GoX better. And
we picked up 100 feet per second, I think, with the GoX.
Yeah.
But the Swiss was practically the same, and it was more dirty.
Oh, yeah, because we just milled the graphite into it.
Yeah.
Graphite is little more than a contaminant.
That's what I like to say.
Who said that?
I believe it was Captain F.M. Smith of the Royal Artillery. Okay, here's shot number 3 with the wet mill powder. $17.18. Man, super consistent. My flint fly off. Damn it.
Did.
Jeez.
It's all right. I heard it.
I bet I don't have a screwdriver on me neither.
Probably not.
Seems to be burning clean enough. It's loading.
Yeah.
Nice and easy.
Good. Tried to look cool.
What a noob.
Yep.
Fumble your ramrod. In front of God and everybody, too. Flint's flying out. Jeez. Okay. So this is shot number 4 with the wet milled Osage orange. No, I yanked that one. I'm sure of it.
Yeah.
17.25.
Okay, so what's our average?
This stuff averaged 17.16. That is a solid 150 feet per second slower than dry milled Osage.
Yep.
But let's see how clean it looks, because it's loading really easy.
All right. Oh, I've seen worse.
That's not bad at all, really.
Yeah.
I don't think it's any cleaner than dry milled Osage, but it certainly is pretty damn clean. Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so now this stuff was milled for 24 hours. Half the time that we would mill our dry mill Osage. It's very consistent, but it's at least 150 feet per second slower
Than dry.
than the dry mill, but the dry mill's milled for twice as long. So now, why?
What's our spread?
23.7.
Oh, that's not bad.
No, it's basically, this is like GoX, but much, much cleaner.
Yeah.
Much cleaner.
Yeah, I'm swabbing the hell out of it, and that looks pretty damn good.
All right.
But why? 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 Why is it not as efficient? What can we do to make it more efficient?
Mill it longer.
Even mill it wet longer?
It's the only thing I could think of.
Oh man, are we gonna have to do a 48-hour wet mill now?
I don't want to.
I don't want to either.
I think so.
You guys don't want to see that, do you?
Of course they do.
Oh no. This stuff is not bad powder at all.
No,
It's consistent. It's basically GoX powder with like Swiss cleanliness, man.
the downside is it requires solvent to mill, and then you have to dry it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my problem with the whole thing, is not so much that you got to buy a gallon of solvent. Okay. I don't buy that. The shop buys that. But it's having to dry it. It's having to get it dry.
Yeah.
And that, to me, in my opinion, takes the same amount of time. You got to let it dry for 12 or 24 hours. And if you have to do that, you might as well just dry mill it.
Yeah.
Because at least when you dry mill it, it comes right out. It's ready to get wet and press.
Yes, precisely.
So this stuff, you have to let it dry. And I was forcing it. I had it in front of the fan all day.
Yeah.
And then I put it in the toaster oven the next day. Yeah. And it still wasn't all the way dry.
That's right. It still was a little wet.
Yeah, so does this work? Yeah, it totally works. But I get better performance just dry milling.
Yeah.
So let's have a look at the target.
All right. It's pretty good right there.
I had 2 on the target. That's not bad.
Yeah.
Okay. Well.
All right, I'm sorry for making it seem like this stuff was really, really lousy, but when we were testing the Remington, it looked like it was going to be really low performing powder. Those first few shots were, well, pretty anemic, I would say. Our wet mill powder in the Remington averaged 767 with a max spread of 34, where our dry milled Osage averaged 953 with a pretty wide spread of 117. But if you want to discount that really low shot of 882, it averaged 968 with a max spread of 49. Either way, that's a solid 200 foot per second loss in the Remington New Model Army, which was concerning for me. And again, we did compensate for our lower density. I had to run 30 grains of volume to get the correct weight of 25 in the Remington. So don't think that I shorted it. It just worked out to be a little wimpy. As far as the rifle was concerned, it performed pretty damn well. It's reasonably powerful, at least in the rifle. It's accurate and very consistent. The wet mill powder in the rifle averaged 1716 with a max spread of 23, where our dry milled powder averaged 1857 with a max spread of 50. So almost 150 foot per second loss in velocity, but it does appear that the wet mill powder has tighter spreads. That could be a fluke, or it could be something that's repeatable. So again, it actually made pretty decent powder. That, in the rifle anyway, I can't speak for the pistol because I've never ran GoX in that particular revolver, is basically GoX that's about as clean as Swiss. It's very, very clean, accurate, and more consistent than GoX, at least from what I usually get with GoX. I know, people get mad that I'm always picking on GoX. As far as it being clean, in my subjective view, it looked like the wet mill powder was a little cleaner than the dry. Maybe it wasn't, but it seemed that way to me. Why it would have been cleaner, I don't know if maybe isopropyl alcohol has something to do with it, or it could be the little bit lower density. That can also change fouling. So there's that. As far as how this wet mill batch compared to our first wet mill batch, this stuff did do better by around 80 feet per second, I think. The first wet mill batch was low 1621 or something like that. I'll put a picture up here. Now, for that stuff, if you remember, we took half of it, we kept it, and we ran another test with it. And then we took the other half and we remilled it dry, pressed it, and did it again. And then we did pick up some velocities, but the numbers between those two there are practically the same. So that's the wet and dry milled stuff, and then our new wet mill batch. I would call that practically the same. So as far as the wet mill powder looking like it's going to be able to shorten up mill times, it doesn't appear to be the case at all. The way I look at it is after you wet mill it for 24 hours, then you have to spend at least 24 hours waiting for the stuff to dry. And to me, that's time that it could be milling dry and then giving you higher performing powder with the end result anyway. So there's that. You also have the cost of having to buy the solvent and the drying time. Those are the two biggest cons, in my opinion. If there's some pros that I can think of, one, it's much, much quieter than milling stuff dry. Dry milling is noisy. It's just the way it is. I suppose it could be safer if you're worried about a spark or something going on in your ball mill. I suppose the alcohol could help, but I think alcohol is also flammable, so there's that. So maybe it's not a pro. As far as other things with the wet mill, I'm open to suggestions. If there's something you guys would like to see, more alcohol, less alcohol, let me know. I'm always open to suggestions. I think I will do at least one more experiment where we mill it for 48 hours wet to see if we don't gain our lost 150 foot per second worth of velocity. Again, I think that would just show that one, it's not any more efficient, and two, longer mill times makes better powder. So there. So let me know what you guys want to see. I'm always open to suggestions. So as usual, folks, if you thought this video didn't suck, do me a favor and hit the like button, consider subscribing, and if you did think it sucked, go make your own damn video.